Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. Welcome to the Complex Trauma Academy. My name's Linda and I'm your trauma recovery coach. It's great to be here with you this morning, and we're doing our segment this morning on narcissistic mothers. If you're here for the first time, welcome. It's great to have you with us. We have an awesome class that comes along each morning, and you can join in with, connect with, and get to know a few people around the globe as well. Now, this morning I've done something a little bit different in that I've made the workbook free that goes with this morning's class. And I'll just put the link in here in the comments for you so you can grab the workbook and you can follow along. And the workbook is exactly what it says. You can download it, and this video will be available in the Complex Trauma Academy afterwards as well. And it doesn't stay up on social media, is the short version. And so you can watch it again and again. Now, if you are already a member of the Complex Trauma Academy, go to the page and sign into the Academy so you don't have to sign up again. And if you are new to the Academy, you just sign in, make your own password. It's all under your control, and you can determine how often you need to see the video, do the workbook, and begin to change up your life. One of the things I've become aware of is with complex trauma, how much we're unaware of the fear that stops us from stepping up and stepping into taking on new information and then integrating it into our day-to-day life. And this is why complex trauma is so complex, is because it's unique to each individual what's happened. So we are the only ones that can drive our boat, so to speak, and say, right, fear can just take a rest over here to the side, and I'm actually going to take a risk on getting some education and integrating it into my day-to-day life and changing things up so I don't go on repeat cycle again. And all of us know what it's like to be on repeat cycle. So this morning I want to do a couple of things. We're going to have some fun, and I want to give you a brief overview of what narcissistic mothers are like. This is one of the toughest topics there is because it's our mum. And as we go into what role she plays, we'll begin to understand why it's hard to unpack it for us as well. And then I want to play you a very brief video. It's less than 3 minutes, which is going to give you a very eye-opening visual of what we talk about and how our mother is the core, our first initial connection into this world. And then we're going to have some fun because I'm going to give you some visuals. I've come up with a creative way to do this and give you some visuals as to what it's like for us internally that we have yet to touch the surface of, so that we can not only move into recovery, but we can also head from recovery into remission, so we become well. Good morning, girls. It's great to see you here this morning. So the first part is, what does a narcissistic mum bring to the equation? So our mothers provide our first attachment to the world. So we learn from her how to bond with others. Our initial sense of self-worth comes from how she cares, nurtures, protects us, and shields us from harm. Our mother's ability to tune into our emotions, validate our pain, and our basic needs impacts us at a foundational level. Our emotional regulation, our attachment style, and our development. Now, I just want to pause to give you some really practical ideas and examples of what all of that means. So for me, now, one of the challenges for me is I love my mum. My mum's deceased. She's been deceased for, headed towards 30 years. But I love my mum, but I also recognize that she had these qualities, and I'm aware that she did because of the wound that she carried as well, and a wound that had been passed down for generations due to the trauma in each generation that kept continually getting passed down through habits and behaviors. So for me, my mum, so one of our foundational things is she shows us how to connect with the world. My mum didn't have the ability to do that. So she didn't have a wide social circle. We didn't have people over coming and going. There wasn't a lot of social things that happened in our world at home. When it comes to her recognizing my pain, so things like as a teenager, I had like this really, wasn't just a lump on my heel, it was like a really solid lump, and it hurt like crazy. And my mum's attitude was, oh, I'm like 13 or 14. You just ring the doctor and you go down and you sort it out. And so much of my life was like that. You go down and you sort it out. And I look now and I can understand why in my adult life I was very much like, okay, let's just go get it sorted out. And that leaves out the ability to communicate with others as adults that this is happening, let's get in and do this together. So it's these seemingly small things that impact not only our sense of self, but how we go about our life. And I can understand truly why I drove one of my husband's nuts, because I have just been used to taking action, having to do things on my own. And, one day there'll be a husband and it'll be a whole new learning experience for me. No, I'm single. There's no one on the horizon. But it will be a whole new experience for me to open up and communicate. Now, I do that effectively with my adult kids, so I taught them and we all do it together. But to do it with another adult will again be something different again. But we can do it once we know, we go, oh, wow, I can learn this. All right. So everything that happened, we can learn to change it up in our adulthood and have it reflect who we are and where we want to head with our life. Oops, I've just made something absolutely massive on my screen. So when we have a toxic or narcissistic mother, she can do the following. So she can chronically shame us, meaning we never develop our healthy sense of self. So remember in the abandonment series, we walked through exactly what developing a healthy sense of self meant and what it means, right down to our neurological level and how it impacts us at a heart and soul level as well. And we don't develop a healthy sense of self-esteem. And, let's all stick our hands up. Who can relate to that? It took me years to work out how to have a healthy sense of self-esteem. We are shamed for academic, social, professional, and personal choices, our choice of career, partner, friends, lifestyle, manner of dress, personality and preferences. If we ever act individually without consulting her, we are shamed. Now, I want you to think about this too. It's not just verbal that all of this happens. It can be non-verbal. So with my mum, God love her, she didn't need to say much. And I knew that I was either a disappointment or she disagreed with my choice or whatever. And it's crazy making, because if you say something, then it's like, no, I didn't say anything. Oh, yeah, read your face and your body language, and you're telling me that you don't agree with what I'm doing. And it's nuts. We're human and we need this communication happening. We need open communication. As I said to one of my clients yesterday, go for oversharing with your spouse and then dial it back. It's better than, minimal sharing. And we can do this. We can go through into oversharing and come back to a balance because we need to have that experience, okay? She damagingly compares us to our siblings and to our peers. We always fall short. Yep. And it doesn't matter how hard we tried either. We always feel like we're falling short, and we can never quite put our finger on it too sometimes. She treats us as extensions of her. We must appear publicly to be well-dressed and well-behaved. In public, we are praised, but behind closed doors, we are criticised. Again, it can be non-verbally as well. She competes with us, interrupts our transition into adulthood, and crosses sexual boundaries. She will either shame us or make us to be perfectionists. She may not educate us about our bodies and is always in competition with us. Denies us our independence from her. Look, when I was writing this out last night, I sat there and I just went like, wow, that was my life. My mum had another couple of kids when she was mature age, so she was 39 and 41. I went down when she had the first child, and she went to play tennis, and she said to me, "Don't tell anyone you're my daughter." And I just sat there and went, what? It's like, how can you, why would you be ashamed of me? I was, worked full time, productive, etc. Having a clean, healthy life. Why would you be ashamed of me? And it wasn't about me. I didn't understand it at the time, but, me being the good old rebel, I told everyone I was her daughter. I'm not going to hide away. I have nothing to be ashamed about. And as for educating about the bodies, oh my goodness, can you remember the days when we literally, my mum said to me, "I've got to tell you something." And she sent my brother into the shower, made sure he was in the shower. We were sitting in a lounge room that was dark and only the kitchen light around the corner was shining. And she began to tell me, one day you're going to bleed from down there. And I sat there and I go, what? I had no idea what she was on about. It took me ages to work out what she was trying to tell me. And God love it. Look, she did the best that she could, that she knew how, and it was really tough for her. And she was a single mother in a time when there was no help for single mothers. So I love her for all she did, but I'm aware that all of this stuff impacts us deeply, okay? Because she's our first person to teach us all of these. Appearances are everything, even though she will deprive us of emotional and psychological support. Can treat us as nuisances rather than human beings. Emotional incest, we have no autonomy. She wants to know the ins and outs of every single part of our life. And the opposite of that happens as well. She doesn't want to know anything about us. It's all about her. I remember ringing her when I lived, she lived one place and I lived out in the country. I got off the phone one day. I thought, I ring my mum every week. Now, this is back in the days before mobile phones, okay? And we all remember those dial-ups. And she never once says, "How are you? What's happening for you in your life?" It's all about her. And I just went, wow. But I didn't love her any less. I just went, that's mum. Mainly because there was so much else that had happened in my life that at the time she was my one link, albeit maladaptive, to life, my former life. She endures narcissistic injury when she doesn't get her way or her superiority is questioned. And I know that I don't need to explain that to you. Her emotions are everything from instant rage to love bombing, or in my case, there was just nothing there. Even when she passed away, my mum called me in and she knew she was going to die, and she said to me, "Thank you for being my beautiful daughter, but in all my life, my mum didn't know how to say the words, 'I love you.'" And that's really tough because it's one of the ways that we do communicate with each other, that we do love each other. It's hard yards to realise sometimes what we missed out on. She can emotionally invalidate us, gives us guilt trips and gaslights us, and that comes down to what we were talking about earlier as well, how even non-verbally she can disapprove of us. There's no empathy for how we feel. There's no consideration of our basic needs. We're told we're oversensitive, we're dramatic, and she redirects the focus back to her needs. I have to tell you something funny about that. When I was a teenager, that's exactly what happened to me. They used to call me Elizabeth Taylor, call me a drama queen, you're oversensitive, blah, blah, blah. And all I really wanted was for one of the adults in the house to sit down and talk to me and have a conversation and, help me navigate through all the emotional stuff. But that was never going to happen. And that's okay, because then we get to raise our kids differently, and we also get to impact the children that are around us differently. So even if we don't have our own children, we get to impact the world around us with a difference. Okay, I want to show you a video that will now show you literally, it's a mother and a baby, and it's called the still face experiment. And when I watched it, everything that I've just read fell into place and I got it. Okay, so let me just grab the video for you. It's under 3 minutes and you will see. I can just drop it in here.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment that the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, you're so big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation. And they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Pretty powerful stuff. Just from that, we can begin to understand how important our mother's role was in our day-to-day life. If you needed a Kleenex, join the crowd. I did when I first watched that too, because it really hit me in the heart. Now, I want to give you, so we were able to see externally what was happening then, but what happens for us internally over years of time. So I got a bit experimental, got a bit creative yesterday. I went toy shopping. Oh. Danae says, oh heck, I did that at 43, 48 when I got shunned by my mother in a verbal, communicative way, emails and phone calls, and I still did that. Yep. And we will, and I'll explain why we will, because of many years. So for us that are older, it becomes many decades of having to shut down internally. So I wanted to be able to show you this in a very real sense, even though we're using dolls today. And here's why. Because when we have a visual, then we can begin to go within. That's right, Ali. Powerful stuff. We can begin to go within and understand why we need to. So if we look at that baby, okay, so remember the baby and the mum does the still face and there's no connection. Now I want you to think about it for us from the perspective that our mum was carrying wounds, and or from the generations that have gone before us, there was no emotional intelligence, well, minimal, let's just say minimal. So we never were able to discuss anything emotional. There was no language given to us for our emotions. So how I learnt about my emotions is when I was teaching my own kids. And communication was rare. It was more, do as I do as I say, don't question me. And we've all lived it. Okay, so I want you to think of the baby. Now, I don't know how this is going to work because you need two hands to tie stuff, but let's just go in the flow for the moment. And in our heart center, the first place that closes down is our heart center. So if you can imagine on the inside, okay, we're going to improvise. Inside of us, around our heart, becomes tight, okay? So that produces fear in us. When there's no connection, it produces that fear and we begin to shallow breathe. When he's talking about the emotions and what's happening, we now have the language of emotional regulation or emotional dysregulation. And, sorry, it's kind of not in the heart area, but you get what I mean. And this continues to happen because we hold on and we're waiting for that love bank to get filled. We have to learn emotional regulation from our mums, or we end up learning dysregulation, which is what happened with my mum. So it affects us internally right down to our central nervous system. Now, when we're a baby, is this cute or what? Look at the size difference between mum and a baby. So we're looking up to this person and they're like, seven times the size of us. So what sort of fear does that produce in us? And what is that fear communicating to us about whether we're safe to connect or not? So look at the loneliness epidemic that's happening at the moment and think about the generations that have gone before us. And that's happening because this kind of thing has been repeated for generations. Now, internally for us, we begin to shut down each part of our body. So if we look at the three brains that they say we have, so our heart, our gut, and our brain, then we can begin to say, every time I have to hold my breath because I'm afraid, my internal system is dysregulating, and I'm beginning to form that pattern repeatedly. So for me, by the time I was 15, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and no one knew why because it came out of nowhere seemingly. But the amount of trauma that I had experienced just basically tipped my brain over the edge, because inside of me is held so tight. Now, here's where it's really hard for us to imagine this. So I got some Play-Doh. Can you believe it? My Play-Doh. If we touch the outside of our body, it's all spongy. And we go, I'm not holding myself tight. No, I'm not. I can feel that. It's all there. And the only way we're going to begin to understand how tight we're holding ourselves internally is through our breath, okay? Well, that's a lot of the work that I've done. And as we know, when we did the My Authentic Self course and we did soul centering, we began to feel what's happening for us internally and go, right, this is how I process it. So when we become aware of each part that we're holding tight, so when I first began this process, I'd breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out, because scientifically that's optimal breathing for everybody. And my first point was I could feel how tight my jaw was. Then it took me ages to begin to feel how tight my throat was internally. And then I'd have to practice getting my mind, so consciously choosing to relax that area. And as I went through each part of my body that was tight, so eventually I got down to my gut. But once my gut was, I could feel that everything's flowing internally, it then came back up to my heart. And that's where I'm currently doing all my work, breath work around my heart. So each time I'm able to acknowledge what's holding me back, I'm then able to breathe more deeply. And it's not just about doing the breath work, it's being able to acknowledge what's happening for me, what I need to recognize and where I'm going. It's not about going back to the past. Holly says, me too, my jaw is so tight. Absolutely. And one of the other things that came with my tight jaw was so many migraines. And when I conquered this side of like being able to relax my jaw, the migraines receded to severe headaches, so on. So I go months now without even having a headache. But one of the things you can do is look down right now and see if your hands are clenched like this. See if you can feel if your toes are curled under. I was amazed when I first started to notice that my toes were curled under, and I'd been doing it for decades and didn't know. And it's a really good indication of when we're anxious. So that's the external side. But then internally, when I slow my breathing down and build my awareness of my body, I'm able to begin to work through what's happening for me. Okay? So I don't want you to think that there's no solutions. And I put that order in the book as well, because I found that it's really helpful that when we know that this has happened for someone else and there's an order to it, because with complex trauma, we need the order, okay? So what I want you to be able to do is I've put a page full of questions in the book for you so that you can print it out and go through, and one day at a time, take one question, do your deep breathing and begin to reflect internally what's happening for you, because it's from there that you'll be able to devise strategies to continue to move forward. One of the things we don't want to do is keep going back to the past. We don't need to, okay? We do not need to do a bunch of talk therapy. We need to do, this is what's happening today. This is where I'm at. this is the question for self-reflection, and this is where I want to head, and I can build strategies in the gap as well. Okay? It's easy when we know how. It's hard work, but it's easier when we know as well. Yeah, Dinah says she's relaxed. Must be Tim. Yeah, the trauma-informed movement definitely helps, because when we retrain our mind on our breath, we're beginning to train our whole system that we're safe to breathe. So when you look at that baby and you go, oh wow, she was terrified, part of us holds our breath waiting to see if we're going to be safe. Is our mum there or not? And what happens when, for me, in my younger years, my whole family disappeared overnight. And now science shows us unequivocally that when that sort of thing happens in childhood, it creates our abandonment wound, okay? And I can tell you it lasted until, was it this year or last year? Anyhow, recent times, when that whole energy came up and out of me. And if I hadn't done my authentic self-work, there's no way that wound would have come up, and I would have been carrying it all of my life, okay? So I had to be very grounded in who I am in order to let the physical response up as well. And I just know, girls, I just know that all of this impacts our weight. So it's a case of, if we haven't addressed our abandonment wound, then our weight is going to continue to, go up and down, like be the seesaw. I haven't put all the details together yet, but you'll be the first to know once I do. Absolutely. And I believe our heart's involved with it as well. So it is all coming together, all the scientific side of it, and then I'm adding the soul side in. I can see the soul side now, but I want to put it all together so that we never have to go down these roads again of every time we get triggered and the fear response happens, that it's not just about excess eating, it's about us literally holding ourselves together in fear. Absolutely, Danae, that our weight is our protective barrier, but it's also about that we need to learn emotional regulation, and we also have to have experiences that we're safe to feel those feelings and let them move through our body. There's a number of things that impact us, definitely. Okay, so grab your workbook, start doing your questions, and feel welcome to drop by into group and let me know how you go. Oh, Ali says, Danae, cake, it keeps us safe as we cannot be kidnapped. Let's all go eat cake. Love it. Okay, thanks for joining in this morning, girls. I'll catch you later. Bye for now.